Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Dr. Nuruddin Burka. I'm a clinical professor at University of Calgary. Today, we're going to have the introduction session for an exciting series dealing with the pandemic from a Maqasid framework. In the agenda today, we will be looking at briefly reviewing Horizon Academy Institute vision and mission. We will talk about Horizon's approach in the leadership development course, which is a course that we have been offering since last 13 years now. Those are series of 12 weeks that tackle specific topic in Islamic studies or leadership or ethics or variety of topics that we've tackled over the years. We've done Maqasid Shariah in the past, and this year, at this time, we wanted to use as a case study the current pandemic. We will briefly review in a moment the pandemic history and the resulting event and stories that happen around the pandemic. And there are a lot of questions that were raised as a result of this pandemic. Today, we're not going to be talking about the medical aspects of the pandemic. We're not going to get into the symptoms and the cure and all those things. I would say here that to refer to your local health authority, they're the best to give advice for each city or province, as reaction and response will vary from location to location. Number four, we will share with you your expectation from the course as we received, as a result of the registration, we received what you're expecting from the course. And we will talk about how we're going to approach this question of pandemic in the Maqasid framework and what are the dimensions and roles we're going to cover. I will be sharing with you what are the topics for the 12 weeks and the assigned speakers for them. And we will be talking about some pandemic cases and how we going to format the sessions between Tuesday and Thursday every week. And then we will do an introduction to Maqasid, their benefit, and I will close by sharing with you a specific pandemic case study that we will be discussing on Thursday. So, Horizon Academy Institute was initiated in 2008 as a nonprofit charitable organization. Our vision have evolved. We since changed our vision and worked on it through a series of design thinking planning sessions. And the current vision states as follow: developing leaders through transformational learning. We think that this is a very loaded vision statement that guide everything we do at Horizon. The mission, Horizon Academy Institute provide programs and services in education and leadership development through the universal value of Islam and modern best practices. We measure our success through our ability to provide a culture of effectiveness, innovation, and trust, while building new generation of competent, knowledgeable, and value-driven leaders. Horizon series leadership development course have certain approach, and in our series we focus on the society's vision and mission. So we don't tackle subjects that are outside our vision and mission, and we build a cultural background for Muslim leaders. So we have programs that teach the young. We take kids from 4 years old to high school, and we also are in the business of training leaders. in the community that can make a difference. It is an evidence-based approach. It's not an emotional or politically motivated series. Um, we use diverse scholarly opinion, and we're not restricted to certain scholar from certain geographical areas. It's not limited to certain madhab or certain Islamic movement or the like. We use the literature of the schools that we are studying or tackling, not the literature of their opponent. Of course, you can read both, but first you have to present the opinion of the authors from their own sources before you get into their critique. We use a scholarly approved curricula. So when we develop an Islamic curriculum, we consult with the university level professors and scholars. And Horizon Academy is intimately putting its mark in this curricula and shaping them. It's not intended to make you having a mastery of Sharia. This is not a Sharia program. This is a more an Islamic culture development, and to give people the ability to act as leaders in the community. It's not intended to make you also boastful and just to say, oh, I took Maqasid Sharia and I took Usul Fiqh and all those things. And it's not intended to compete, but rather to complement what other mujtahid and scholars are providing and organizations. And it attempts and strives to present complex concepts in a simplified template, blending mainly in English with some Arabic text as necessary and as needed. And this is to bring and break down complex concepts and make them accessible to the masses is what Dr. Ahmed al-Raisuni called fiqh al-qurb. And fiqh al-qurb, or we could translate it as the fiqh of approachability, is in one of his article, Dr. Raisuni said, the Ummah is in need of the fiqh of approachability, where the scholars of fiqh are near the masses, near their issues, near their feeling and what bothers them, and occupy their mind, and it's approachable when giving their answers and fatwa, and when transmitting their knowledge and ijtihad. And all aspects of the teaching should be accessible to all sectors of the society, not scholars talking to scholars and the rest of the community is not benefited. And so our leadership development program, in a nutshell, capture or attempt to modulate system of concept, relevance and accuracy, focus. It aims at getting into depth into the material studied, and achieving meaning in building a sense of responsibility and a cumulative and increment growth from this material. So here we are. Back in December 31st of last year, the Chinese government informed the WHO that they have a 41 patient with mysterious pneumonias. And from that emerged the new corona virus, which was named COVID-19 in February, just a couple of months ago, in February 11th, COVID-19, because there are multiple known coronaviruses, but this is the latest of them. And in March 11th, the WHO declared the outbreak as a pandemic. Now, where are we now? If you look at this map that is put out by Johns Hopkins, it shows the total number up to yesterday at 11:30 in the morning of total confirmed cases of coronavirus at 1,292,564 people. Out of those, 70,798 are dead. Those are human beings dying here out of this pandemic. And we have still people who are recovering, 271,000 recovered from the infection. Here in Canada, I have some numbers listed here. The health authorities overall are doing very well in Canada. It varies from province to province. Here I'm in Alberta, and up to now they've managed well the pandemic, but things are getting a little more critical these days. There are 15,806 cases confirmed in Canada, 293 deaths. The number of testing, 334,000 tests. And if you look at the bottom, here is the number of cases from back in December, and it's still growing worldwide. And you can see here from the world map that the pandemic have touched all corner of the world. Um, um, for, for some reason, Africa seems to be lagging behind, but nobody is immune. So there are a lot of questions that stem out of this pandemic. And I'm sure you've heard many of them, but I just want to cite some examples here. There's a lot of conspiracies whether the virus was it was man-made, either by the Chinese or by the American. Different people are saying different stories. Or is it natural virus? Is it due to a 5G mobile phone network sucking the oxygen out of the blood? Literally, I mean, we have people talking about these theories. Is it a conspiracy of the 1% elite or reptilian-human that are trying to control the economy of the world and control humanity? What is the effect of rumors and conspiracy theories in combating a pandemic? What is the economical risk of locking down a country versus practicing the so-called herd immunity? Who to save first when the emergency room and the ICUs are overwhelmed with patients? Do you save the young? Do you save the elderly? And those are ethical questions that are being raised. And we hear conspiracies and theories and stories that that they're just letting old people die because they want to get rid of old people, and that's part of the conspiracy of the one percenters. We have people who love to talk about doomsday and Sa'a and Qiyam Sa'a. They're having a party these days because this fits right on what they were predicting. Every once in a while, somebody predict the end of the world, and we've been hearing this since Y2K in 2000, and we still at every occasion hearing those stories and conspiracies and belief. How the public sector and civil society can respond to the coronavirus is another question. Do health authority rules interfere with the freedom of religion? As you know, the health authorities are suggesting that gathering at certain numbers should not happen. So they started with 500 to 200 to 50, and here in Alberta, 15. In other province, they're down to 5. In other countries, they lock down the whole country, except for necessity. What about interfering with the human rights and responsibilities of people toward this pandemic? What about the emotional and psychological issues of the pandemic? What about the cultural and social issues of the pandemic? How the world will look after coronavirus pandemic? And people and thinkers are busy thinking the post-corona or virus pandemic and how the world will change, and they're preparing already in many countries and provinces. People have put together teams to start thinking about the future of the world and of their region. How do we compare this pandemic to the plague that we've seen in the human history that killed a lot of people, and how the crisis management compare for both cases? Will the pandemic change human intellect and behavior? How can we be part of the solution in fighting the virus? Will coronavirus change the world permanently, and how? So all those are questions that you hear, and I'm sure you have more in your mind that you've entertained and you're thinking about. So in this course and in this series, we like to specifically ask the questions in the Islamic perspective, and very more specifically within the maqasid or the objective of Sharia, of Islamic jurisprudence perspective. How does Sharia deal with crisis, particularly pandemic situation? How is the essence of Islamic rules related to this topic, and how should they be followed and applied? How is Islam presenting contextual guidance in these situations? And what type of involvement, both intellectually, spiritually, socially, etc., are expected from the perspective of Sharia objective? How can reflections on the current pandemic situation be used to grow and mature individuals? We have to start from the self and organization and the broader society. And how does Maqasid, the general purposes of Maqasid, how can they help us effectively deal with crisis and pandemic situation? So we asked you in the registration form to tell us what your expectation from this course based on the outline that we circulated. And this word crowd capture basically your responses. And it's summarized as such. During this vulnerable time, people want to seek understanding, learning, collaboration, meaning, and transformation from an Islamic maqasid perspective, and must take personal and social responsibility to deal with the pandemic crisis and its consequences, away from panic, resistance, and conspiracy. Very loaded statement that we try to derive from what you shared with us, so we could have that in mind and what you had in mind. So coming to how we have envisioned tackling this question of the pandemic within the Maqasid framework, we put together a vision and mission for the course. And the vision for this course is to deal with pandemic situation from a critical Islamic perspective. We don't want a superficial literalistic read of the text. We need a more critical read of the text to interpret the situation of the pandemic. The mission is through the Maqasid framework. This series aims to create an interactive platform to discuss individual and collective responsibility in dealing with the pandemic situation on the spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and social level. So when you look at this mission, we could divide this to 5 dimensions: the spiritual, the emotional, the social, and the societal, and the intellectual. And the players that are interacting with this 5 dimension are 6 players that we picked as a representative of who's interacting with the pandemic. First, we have Al-Abd, Abdullah, or Amatullah, the worshipper, and how they're interacting with these dimensions. We have a parent dealing with their children, their responsibility as the breadwinner during this time, and the different facets that a parent play. As a healthcare provider, or as frontline essential service people. As a patient who's affected by the disease, or who is having other complications that are not related to the disease of COVID-19, and also as a news consumer. We're bombarded by a lot of news from TV, from radio, from social media, and the like, and from family and friends, and from the health authority on a daily basis. How do we deal with that? And also our role as member of non-profit organization. Each one of us is involved with some kind of work in the community. And so we wanted to know that role, how it interacts with these levels. So when we planned for putting together a curriculum of Maqasid al-Sharia, we contacted one of the biggest names of Maqasid, Dr. Ahmed al-Raisuni, who is the head of the International Association of Muslim Scholars. And this is a few years ago in 2014. And what we asked him, can we use his curriculum, because he's done a curriculum that is well done, concise, and very approachable to everybody. And in that, he responded to us in this letter when we asked him to use his curriculum. But in a nutshell, he said that about my lectures, you have my permission to translate and summarize them. If there is anything that you find difficult, leave it and use other material. And that was very gracious of him and very modest of him to have allowed us to use and leave what we see fit within our context in the West. I mentioned Ahmed Raisuni. We built the curriculum of this course based on his curriculum, but there are a lot of scholars of Maqasid that have helped and that we used in our research to put together the series. And I'm showing here some that are living scholars and some that have passed on and made huge contributions. And also in these two rectangles, we're listing here scholars that have come over the history of Islam and contributed somehow to the Maqasid schools. This is the curriculum and for the 12 weeks. Today we're tackling the introduction, and we're talking just about the framework that we're gonna use, and we're gonna do an introduction on Maqasid in a bit. The second session will be done by Dr. Ahmed Raisuni, who is residing in Morocco, but currently he is visiting, giving some lectures in Qatar. He gonna give a talk entitled "Definitions and Clarification Around Maqasid." The third week will be History and Evolution, and Mr. Hisham Abadi, who is a board member of Horizon Academy, will present that third session. The fourth session will be presented by Dr. Jasir Ouda. And Dr. Jasir Ouda, and I'm going to show you a clip from him in a moment. He's one of the Western-based most productive scholars of Maqasid Sharia. Originally, he has a PhD in information systems, but then he got a PhD in philosophy, specializing in Maqasid al-Sharia. He published over 30 books in the field. He's very prolific, and he's a visiting professor in South Africa, and he is an adjunct professor in Ottawa. And he also the head of the Maqasid Institute that is based both in London, US, and in Canada and South Africa. Very smart young man who have approached the Maqasid from a new perspective. And we will see, he will present to us his own framework, and he's actually working and publishing a book on a new framework for Maqasid. The fifth session is entitled Interest and Harm. And Mr. Mohammed Bilyamani, who is one of the founder of this work, former board member based now in Toronto. Mohammed Bilyamani, we owe it to him on putting together a lot of this material. So we're indebted to his work. He's true visionary. Number 6 is necessities, daruriyat. And Sister Al-Hajja Al-Rabhawi, she's one of our Islamic teachers at Horizon Academy Institute. She teaches both at the Horizon Leadership Academy, which is a full-time school, and she teaches our weekend school on Sunday. Number 7 is interest in the 3 level. Dr. Yasser Ghannam, he's an IT professional, and he's a former board member of Horizon, and he's gonna entertain the interest 3 levels. Number 8 is balancing interest and harm, and Mr. Khalid Saad is a young man originally from Lebanon, and he is very active in teaching youth. He's specialized in interfaith dialogue, and also dialoguing with both people of faith and atheists. Yes, Mr. Khalid is also working with Horizon in different capacity, teaching our youth on Sunday and other projects. And number 9 is excuses and consequences. And Mr. Suhaib Ramzan, a former board member of Horizon, who is based now in UK. He's a financial analyst. His job is to work with the oil and gas company to balance their finances, if I want to put it in a simple way. Number 10 is tax and interest and tax. And Dr. Nazir Khan, who is a radiologist who was with us here in Calgary. He now based in Hamilton and works there as a faculty and a radiologist, neuroradiology specifically. Dr. Nazir Khan is a Hafid of Quran. He is the head of research of one of the Islamic organizations here in North America, and very active sheikh and physician. And then we will have the 11th session will be a team effort where we will have a discussion on specific topics that needed more discussion. And so we're not going to do the whole session, the whole series in that day, but we're going to pick certain topics. And number 12 is going to be a synthesis where we're going to do some modeling and come up with and do the synthesis of the whole series. As you could see, we're going to go through Ramadan in this series. We're going to take 1 week off for the week of Eid, as you notice here, after the May 21st, the week after we taken it, the week of the 24th, we'll take it off, and we'll come back June 2nd to continue. The format of the series, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be Tuesday and Thursday. The first session is going to be a conceptual Maqasid session. We're going to give some aspect, one of the theories of that curriculum that I've elaborated for you. We also, on a weekly basis, on Tuesday, we're going to introduce a case study on the pandemic for the audience to think about, and come back on Thursday. And we're going to have on Thursday an open discussion and around the case study of the week, and also around anything that have to do with the concept of the week of Maqasid, and of course the Q&A. So I wanted to briefly give you an introduction to Maqasid Sharia, but we'll dig deeper in the next few weeks. And I want to start you with a 5-minute clip from Dr. Jasir Ouda introducing Maqasid Sharia.
Jasir Ouda, I'm your instructor for this Maqasid Sharia course. Maqasid Sharia has to do with the objectives of the Sharia. Maqasid Qasada Yaqsid is the objective, the purpose, the end, the principle of the Sharia. We will talk about what Maqasid are, and we will talk about what Sharia is. Maqasid first is the objective, is the question of why the Sharia or the Maqasid Sharia. And why opens a lot of ideas that what and how and where and when does not open, because why deals with a higher purpose, a higher level of thinking. I always start by giving this example of traffic light, and my daughter, when she was small, and asked me, why did you stop in front of the traffic light? Well, because it's red. Why? She says, oh, because there is a line. But why the line? Well, because the policeman will take our money if we cross that line, because this is wrong. But why wrong? Well, because maybe somebody is passing or crossing the street while it's red, and it would be dangerous for that person. But why do we have to care? Well, because maybe tomorrow you or me may be passing or crossing the street. But why don't we hit them and they don't hit us? Well, the why is because there is, safety for people, my safety and your safety. is tied to other people's safety. But why not? Why don't we put our safety first and their safety second? Well, because we're all equal. Why are we all equal? Well, because there's something called justice, al-adl. Why justice, al-adl? Well, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-adl. And because his name is justice, then he asks us to maintain that justice, which means that everybody is equal, everybody's safety is the same, and therefore there is a policeman and a law and a line and a red light. And avoiding the question of why to a child or to an adult, let alone an adult, by saying, well, it's red. Red means stop, green means go. And okay, but why? Well, because this is, how Islam is. It's red. You have to stop. That kind of thinking that does not accept the question of why blocks the roads to what's called ijtihad, or reasoning, or thinking, or rethinking. Do we have to do rethinking? Yes, we actually must do rethinking. Not of everything. We'll talk at some point about the fixed and the variable and so forth. But there are many issues in Islam where we have to think and rethink every time the place changes and the time changes and circumstances, because originally these things are not fixed for every place and time. They are supposed to be for changing circumstances and changing times, and they are supposed to renew themselves. The renewal of Islam is a terminology that is coined by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said, "Inna Allah yab'athu ala ra'si kulli mi'ati 'amin li hadhihi al-ummati man yujaddidu laha amra diniha." When he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam that for every 100 years Allah sends a group of people who renew this religion for people. And that renewal is what we're talking about. It's a must, because we cannot really live in a different century by staying at the same politics, the same worldview, the same geography, the same currency, the same kinds of companies, the same clothes for that matter, the same. No, things change with the change of time and circumstances. But is everything changeable? No. And that is also part of the research of Maqasid Sharia. It is meant to take us to the roots of Islam and not to dissolve Islam from the inside. This is also the theory that many scholars believe is the end of the road when it comes to Maqasid Sharia. And that is not true, because Maqasid Sharia is a whole way of thinking, is a whole methodology of approaching Islam, its law, its thought, and all the branches of knowledge under that. And that is, inshallah, what I will try to demonstrate in the next few sessions. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Assalamu alaikum.
جزاك الله خيرا Dr. Jasser Ouda. So, as Dr. Jasser said, al-maqasid, they go beyond the means to the end. It is about to be faithful to the text and its right understanding, as a way to go beyond al-fiqh perspective, to integrate to an integrative thinking about our religion versus our issues, as a way to go beyond the specificity of Islamic school of thought or school of fiqh, and as a way to go beyond the simplifying discussion, beyond simplifying discussing the issues of the Muslim community to contributing positively. Most of what we see is a superficial look at our affairs. We rush to conclusions. We rush to quoting texts from the Deen, from Quran and from the Sunnah, and from the saying of the scholars. Al-Maqasid in this perspective is the intent, is the end, is the principles, is the ethics, is the universal message. So how do we come up with those universal values? And that's a subject also of al-Maqasid discourse. Now, a lot of people who are not aware think that this is an innovation, this is something new, that because they didn't hear of it you know, they knew Islam, but they didn't know what is the subject of maqasid. And I wanted to read for you here the translation of some quote of Imam Ibn al-Qayyim. He said, Shariah's edifice and foundation is based on the wisdom and interest of servants in their livelihood and the hereafter. All of it is justice. You know, anybody who talks to you about an aspect of Sharia that doesn't sound just, that is not Sharia, that's something else. It's all of it mercy. All of it is maslahah, is interest. And all of it is a wisdom, is hikmah. Any issue that deviates from justice to injustice, from mercy to its opposite, from interest to corruption, and from wisdom to nonsense, this will not be part of Sharia, even if it was introduced to it by interpretation. Indeed, Sharia is the justice of Allah among His servant, and His mercy among His creation, His shade on earth, and His wisdom that leads to Him, and to the truthfulness of His Prophet. Imam al-Shatibi, who was one of the big Imams of Maqasid, said that jurisprudence will reveal for the interest of servant now and in the hereafter. Dr. Ahmed al-Raisuni, in one of his articles entitled At-Taqrib li Maqasid al-Sharia, he asks certain questions about the topic of maqasid, or about the science of maqasid. He said, is maqasid suitable for common people, or is it solely for the scholars? Can common people understand maqasid, or is it beyond their scope? Could the knowledge of maqasid corrupt common people's understanding and practice of their deen? Can maqasid be taught in schools for our children? Or is it, as many will make you believe, that this is only for scholars or students of knowledge at the graduate school level? I mean, many universities around the world, they don't teach maqasid until you reach the level of graduate school, because they don't feel like this is for everybody. To answer this question in the same article, Dr. Ahmed Raisuni continues that rulings of Sharia and its objective can be delivered at 3 levels. It could be at the advanced level, detailed, deep scholarly discussion. It could be at the medium level, which is for students and for university students. And it could be for the beginners level, which is for the masses, including youth, for that matter. Al-Shatibi said, this plus Sharia is illiterate. هذه الشريعة أمية. And what he meant by that, that is made simple to be accessible to everybody, because everybody can read Quran. You don't have to be a scholar to read Quran. And actually, this analogy of reading Quran is what I wanted to say in this next slide here. Can the knowledge of maqasid corrupt is the other question. This is a legitimate concern, but the solution is not to avoid maqasid and conceal it, hide it just for the few, for the elite, for the intelligentsia. No, indeed the solution is to actually promote the authentic teaching of the science of maqasid and instill the maqasidi approach and its proper utilization as was practiced by eminent imams. It is important to point out here that misunderstanding or misuse of Islamic studies is not unique to maqasid, but even tafsir al-Quran. I mean, tafsir al-Quran al-Azim is frequently misunderstood. Not everybody understands the meaning of the Quran and the word of the Quran. Is that mean because we cannot, it's not accessible for everybody, we should stop and we should ban common people from reading tafsir al-Quran? Or is that mean that we should ban people from attempting to contemplate on the Quran? Or do we ban them from approaching it altogether? Of course not. Nobody will say this. Similar to this, and by analogy, the study of maqasid, which is really about looking at the wisdom, at the truth, as the secrets of the teaching, is required for everybody, but everybody gets what their nasib, as much as they study and as much as they dedicate themselves into the study and the contemplation. What is the origin of maqasid? When in the history we started hearing about maqasid? And I got this slide, we made it based on an article of Dr. Ahmed Raisuni, where entitled علم مقاصد الشريعة من الولادة الكامنة إلى الولادة الكاملة وعملنا تصرفا. So we took this article and we made it, we graphed it as such. When you study Islam, first thing, of course, the primary source of Islamic jurisprudence is Al-Quran. And after Al-Quran comes Al-Hadith. And then out of the Hadith, the scholars of Hadith that actually compiled the Hadith, like Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, and the many other scholars of Hadith, they made these Hadiths in chapters. And these chapters were organized in a way that require that you understand the meaning of the Hadith and their context and their context. And so when they put a chapter and they put a title for it, it shows from the title of these chapters the fiqh of the scholarship of al-Bukhari. الباب العلم قبل القول والعمل. And then he cites the hadith in the topic. But many times by reading the title of the chapter, you would understand what the interpretation of the hadith that he listed in that chapter. Then comes the schools of fiqh. Then comes out of the fiqh, the scholars needed some rules to organize the fiqh. And so it's like bringing the grammar to the language. So they came up with the science of usul al-fiqh. And out of usul al-fiqh, there is a chapter called Maqasid al-Shariah, which is traditionally started as a chapter within usul, but over time have become independent by itself as a science on its own right. If you go back and trace who first coined Maqasid Sharia, you will find it not as a theories, but as a practice in the time of the Sahaba. When the Prophet, after the Prophet passed, and the group of people that decided not to give zakat anymore, Abu Bakr decided to fight these people who didn't want to pay the tax to the central government. And so he was not gonna let them annul one of the pillars of Islam, that is zakat. At the onset of this war, a lot of memorizer of Quran died, حفظ القرآن. And so Umar radiallahu anhu had a conversation with Abu Bakr and told him that we need to gather the Quran, otherwise we're going to lose the Quran because the memorizer of Quran are dying. Abu Bakr was reluctant because he said that the Prophet did not do this, and I'm not going to do something that the Prophet didn't do. And Umar radiallahu anhu kept conversing with him on this. And basically the argument that Umar had is that this action has maslaha for the ummah. That if we don't do it, we may lose the Quran altogether. So after a while, Abu Bakr got convinced, and then they hired somebody to do this job, and he was reluctant to, and they had to convince him, and Umar also gave him the same treatment, explained to him the maqsad, that is the objective of this action. So Sahaba, when you study their decisions and their actions, especially Umar radiallahu anhu, is the big maqasid of all of them. But they did not write this as theories, they just practiced them. Later on, scholars start coming and start writing on topics like as-salatu wa maqasiduha. What are the objective of salat? Mahasin al-sharia. What are the beauties of sharia? And so among those, Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi أبو الحسن العامري, أبو بكر القفال الكبير, and he's called قفال كبير, and there is another قفال الصغير, الجويني. And I underline الجويني here because Dr. Ahmad al-Raisuni qualified certain of these people as being imams of the imams of Maqasid, that they made huge contribution in the field of Maqasid, not just a minor one. After al-Juwayni, Al-Izz ibn Abd salam also made contribution. Then came al-Shatibi as one of the scholars, but also to list there al-Ghazali, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, Ibn Taymiyyah, but they were not specialized in this as much. They did contribute in their scholarship, but they didn't write treatises specifically for this. These were early contributors of Maqasid. Fast forward to our contemporary time in Tunisia, Ibn Ashur, he got hold of the treaty of Ash-Shatibi, and it was a big revelation when they found this book. This book was found in Tunisia, and we will talk more about who's Ibn Ashur and what his contribution in later sessions. Another Moroccan scholars also found the manuscript of this book of Shatibi. Independently, they were studying it. And later on, the book got traveled around the world, and many more copies of the book got revived. But the big interest that the Zaytuna in Tunis and Ibn Ashur have given this treaty got them into becoming more contributing into the Maqasid field and taking it to another level. And so Ahmad al-Raisuni called this as the complete birth of Maqasid al-Sharia with Ibn Ashur. In the more recent time, we have the late Abdul Azim al-Dib, who actually did the tahqiq of many of the books of the manuscript about Maqasid. Ibn Bayya, a Mauritanian scholar, Jasir Auda, who's our who just spoke in the series, Dr. Ahmed al-Raisuni, and many other scholars are also contributing. And so after the birth come the adolescence of Maqasid Sharia, where the contemporary scholars are attempting to use and find contemporary applications to Maqasid. And our series here on the pandemic fall into this intent. This is a brief history of the origin of Maqasid. And Maqasid's perspective is to invoke fiqh, worship, ibadat, ethics, aqidah, and shura. And Maqasid mind all these areas. I'll give you some examples. When it comes to seeking knowledge, al-ilm wa-ta'allum, the objective to seek the knowledge that lead to action, not just having it as a theory, and seek the actionable side of the knowledge. That is the objective. The benefit of doing that is to find the more common areas to work with others and minimize conflict, prioritize the most beneficial aspect of knowledge. The second thing is the application on aqidah, of application of maqasid in aqidah. The objective here is to approach aqidah as a way to better know and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His mercy. The benefit of doing so is to get rid of useless discussion and obsession with the topics. Like if you ask a Sahabi about the mustalah al-aqidah, it didn't exist. What existed in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and in the time of in the hadith is the word iman, arkanul iman. The aqidah is there to teach the arkanul iman. But over time, we found that certain scholars have gotten so off the center, adding to the field of aqidah topics that are not essence of aqidah. And to that point, you all heard perhaps of fitnat khalq al-Quran, the creation of Quran in the time of Imam Ahmad radiallahu anhu. Imam Ahmad, one of the four imams of school of fiqh, was tested in his time by an innovation that came through a group called the Mu'tazila, where al-Mu'tazila started with good intention to try to exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tanzih Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that process, they felt like certain names and attributes are not appropriate for Allah. And they start annulling the names and attributes of Allah. And to that point, they reach a point where they say, well, Quran is a creation of Allah. He's not a word of Allah. And Imam Ahmad refused that proposal, and he was tested and imprisoned and tortured for this. But he stood his ground. Now, this incident you will find in most the book of contemporary Aqidah book. But what the point of this? I love what Dr. Ahmed Raisuni said about this topic in an article he called الشريعة بين الممارسة بين المدارسة الشريعة بين المدارسة والممارسة. In this article, he said it's not about خلق القرآن. The real focus should be about خلق القرآن. It's not about خلق القرآن, but خلق القرآن. Somebody may say, well, this is important, we should study it. But when we study things, when we teach things, we have to teach things that are relevant to people's life, relevant to people's afterlife, right? If I live and die and never knew the story of Khalq al-Quran, is that one of Arkan al-Iman? No, it's not. Another example is when people put in the Aqidah matters, who is best among the Sahaba? Is Abu Bakr better than Umar or Umar better than Ali? These are not matters of Aqidah, these are matters of opinion, and depending what you know about the Sahaba, you may find that one is stronger than the other in different things. But we are respecting them all, and we take their opinion equally, and we can choose from their opinion, because in the one matter, they may give different opinion, to show the diversity in opinion in this faith. The third application is a shura. And the objective of a shura is to make the best decision in the best way. So making the right decision and making it the right way. What is the benefit? Is to go beyond the good to the great decision. Share to find consensus, and share to teach and learn. Dr. Ahmed Raisuni, again, since we're adopting his series, in one of his articles, listed more than 10 benefits of the maqasid of the shura. He said, one, the shura or consultation is it allows you to get a consultation, to get another opinion. That's number one. It allows you to teach the people who may be of less knowledge than you, but consulting with them, your students, your surrounding, it allows them to benefit from that consultation and learn from it. So teaching is the second thing. The third thing is the debate and the thinking and the consultation allow us to go to a better and superior opinion. The fourth thing is to get out of the desire of the nafs. See, if I start with an idea and I feel like I'm owning it, and by doing consultation, I may improve on the idea. And it forces us to move away from our own ideas if there are other ideas better than them, especially if they are fact-based. Number five is to stop tyranny. You know, they asked Fir'aun of Egypt, Man far'anak? He say in the Egyptian language, ما وجدتش شخص يلمني, or as they say in the Egyptian language. So the fact that a ruler consults with the people of knowledge will lower the chance for becoming a tyrant. Also, it teaches humbleness. Also, it gives respect to specialists. So if I need an opinion on the pandemic, I'm not gonna ask a mechanic. I'm gonna a sheikh. I'm gonna ask the epidemiologist and the frontline healthcare provider. The benefit of al-maqasid, we looked at them as I presented earlier, in this 5 dimensions, looking at them. So for a Muslim, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, socially, and societally, how we're going to interact with al-maqasid. And the time does not allow us to go into more depth in this concept, but you can come back to this recording and contemplate more on it. So with that, this is my last slide here. I want to close by presenting to you the pandemic cases of the week that we like to discuss on Thursday. What is the effect of fake news, rumors, and conspiracy theories on public health? What is the Islamic perspective on fake news? What is Islam saying by people that propagating fake news, whether they believe in them or not, whether they know or not, to just propagate news without knowing? There is some teaching in there. What is the psychology of conspiracy theories and theorists? And what is the difference between conspiracies in general, or conspiracy theories, or critical thinking? And there's a lot of confusion between these 3 concepts. I mean, I don't want to get into it here because that's not the intent of today's talk. But on Thursday, inshallah, we would like you to think about these questions and come ready to discuss them. So on Thursday, we're going to be discussing the concept of maqasid that we started talking about today, and these pandemic cases. With that, I stop here and I'll open the floor to answer questions and hear comments. So you can go ahead and start typing your questions. I'm going through the chat to see if we have any question. Go ahead, please. You can unmute yourself. I think Omar. Go ahead, Omar.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair for putting together the meeting and for starting out the presentation with some good information, good foundational information. My question is just primarily about the assignment that we have for Thursday. Is this going to be emailed out, or do we need to make a copy of it?
I would take a screenshot. That's the easiest way if you have it on your device. You're going to get an email on Wednesday. But if you want to get a head start, I would take it. I'm going to keep the screen on for you if you want to write it down. But we will email it on Wednesday for you guys.
Jazakallah khair.
Okay, question here. Can you please speak briefly about the difference between fiqh and maqasid? Good question. So I'm going to just go back to a previous slide that I've... when the Prophet ﷺ was living among the Sahaba, he was the source of Islamic knowledge. So any question that the Sahaba had, they will go to him and he will give them an answer through the Quran and the teaching of Islam. After the death of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba started, they actually memorized his saying and his tradition, and scholars start gathering the hadith. But the hadith was just independent saying of the Prophet ﷺ based on occasion and events. And then comes the work of the fuqaha who derive the rulings of Islam from the book, from the hadith, and using also something called the consensus or al-ijma', and also using al-qiyas, which is analogy. And so most school of thought of fiqh follow this methodology. They go for Quran, for Hadith, for consensus, and for al-qiyas, except the school of Dhahiri that doesn't do that. So then out of the school of fiqh came scholars who organized fiqh in a way to create some rulings to allow them to maneuver the decision making within the fiqh. And that become called as usul al-fiqh, or like the grammar or the tools that allows the faqih to give a fatwa. Within that aspect of usul al-fiqh, there is a chapter called Maqasid Shariah that has certain nuances we're going to cover in this series. That so Maqasid is a sub chapter of usul, which is a sub chapter of fiqh. Hopefully I answered this question for Khalid. Second question here, Salam, why do Muslims have trouble with the concept of interest, maqasid? Why does it have to be an issue? I mean, intent more than interest. I think this is coming from Dr. Qanduz. Is this a comment or is this really a question? And if a comment, go ahead and tell us what you're thinking. Question. So the translation of the word interest here is al-masalih. There are people and even scholars, contemporary scholars, who don't think that Sharia is about always about maslahah. They think that we should follow the teaching wherever it takes us, and sometime it may take us to something that may not be visible to us as a maslahah. And so I'm puzzled to why somebody will have a problem with it, but nobody should have problem, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want maslahah for his creation. And the Maqasid Sharia came to emphasize that maslahah. The essence of Maqasid Sharia is to look for where is the maslahah in the Shara and pursue it. Next question here by Iman. Didn't Maqasid mainly came to protect belief, mind, wealth, etc.? Where does this fit in the program? Where do we get to learn this? We're going to have a chapter specifically for ad-darurat al-khams and the history of ad-darurat. This starts as 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. We have a whole lesson dedicated for this, Sister Iman. So stay tuned. Khalid, may I comment? Go ahead, Khalid. Khalid Saad.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I just want to ask if we can tackle one important thing, if we can tackle the existence, like why Allah created us, the purpose of our creation, and why do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like all the ibadat, what's if we can tackle such thing. And regarding the Mu'tazila, I'm not here to defend them, because Yohanna Dimashqi was putting shubuhat about Quran. He used to tell them if the word of Quran is Qadim and Isa he's the word of Allah and he's Qadim, then Isa is Qadim, like if Isa Kalimatullah and the Kalimatullah is Qadim and the Quran is Kalamullah and Kalamullah Qadim, and in that way, in their purpose was to integrate. That's it. That's I wanted. And the one who was responsible about this shubha is Yohanna Dimashqi, his name. Jazakumullah khair.
Yeah, so if you heard me closely, what I said is out of good intention, the group of Mu'tazila, we've actually done here at Horizon Academy, we've done a series on the Al-Firaq al-Islamiyya, and we've studied all the Firaq al-Islamiyya in a 12-week series. Inshallah, in the future, we can go back to that and do a replay of that. But many of these deviant organizations that stray from the center of the belief of the Ummah have some good in them. And actually, Mu'tazila specifically brought a lot of contribution to many areas of governance, because what happened, they came through a phase where rulers were a bit tough with opposition, and they were so in this they started using the intellect in a way that got out of good intention, got them into starting to annulling the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But their worst crime in my mind and in my study is that they convinced the ruler of their time to make this aqidah as the law of the land, to a point where if you don't believe in their idea, you cannot get a job in the state, you cannot be a judge in the state, because those are the people who actually make opinion and guide the ummah. And that's the mihna of Imam Ahmad. He happened to come during this time, and he was questioned and asked whether he believed in the creation of Quran, or in the that Quran is the word of Allah, and he insisted that it was the word of Allah. On your other question about application of maqasid, about al-hikmah min al-ibadat, this is actually, and we named and we mentioned that these are some of the subject of maqasid, and there are books out there that actually dedicated to each of these. For example, on Aqidah, Al-Ghazali wrote a book on the meaning of al-asma' wal-sifat, and he did an amazing job getting into the maqasid of al-asma' and sifat. Next question here from says, many people look at the field of maqasid suspiciously. That's what I meant. Okay, thank you, Dr. Khanduz. Khalid said, can you give an example of how the science of maqasid has contributed to our contemporary understanding of, for example, the long-standing controversial issue in Islam? I am just trying to wrap my head around the meaning of maqasid. Okay, so this is just an introduction today, and we're gonna have 12 weeks of maqasid. So stay tuned, Khalid, and Khalid Itani, and we will get you in quite a bit depth in the different chapters of maqasid. And basically what I want you to retain today is the story that Dr. Jasir Auda said about his daughter. His daughter asked him, why do we have to stop in the red light? And asking 3 to 5 whys will allow you to get to the deep meaning of anything. And it will allow you to get into the secret of the teaching. If you don't use maqasid, let me do this opposite. If you don't use maqasid in reading the Quran, for example, there is 2 types of maqasid. There is maqsad al-kalam, that means understanding the law, understanding the language, the Arabic language of the Quran. Because if you don't understand the language of the Quran, then the second level is maqsad al-ahkam. So when we interact with the text, with the Quran or with the Sunnah or with the Hadith, if you don't know the Arabic language, you're going to take the superficial meaning, which is not necessarily the real meaning. In the Hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ said that that the paradise is under the feet of the mothers, does that mean that when your mother is standing, you go and remove her feet and look for paradise? That's just an expression that the Arab use. When the Prophet ﷺ say, Al-Jannatu tahta dhilal as-suyuf, or kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the paradise is under the shade of the sword, doesn't mean literally, physically under the sword. So that's what we mean by maqasid al-lafd, yani, al-kalam. Then on the second level is maqasid al-ahkam, which is what is the intent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this ruling. And that's where the scholars diverge. Some scholars say, oh, Allah meant this, and others say, no, Allah meant something else, that the wisdom from that is what? For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that riba is haram, and we find Islamic banks, and these are practical examples for Khalid when you ask for example. So Muslims, they like to deal in halal. They don't like to deal in interest and riba. So they look for product that is halal. Then they find some so-called Islamic banks that sell Islamic product. And when you start studying their contract, you find that their contract is photocopy of conventional mortgage and banking. What is the intent of Allah from tahrim al-riba? Is for the wealthy people or the bank system not to abuse the poor people. That is the intent. If I go to a so-called Islamic bank just because it has a name Shariah compliant or something, and I say, okay, give me finance for me my house, and they charge me way more than what the conventional mortgage interest-based bank is charging me, this is deviating from Maqasid Sharia. So this is a very good practical. You should not take that product, even if the title say Islamic or Sharia. Another example, if you take your child to an Islamic school, it says Islamic school of so-and-so. But the practice of the teachers, they abuse the kids, or there's things that are immoral happening there, then automatically this is no Islamic anymore. I don't care if they teach Quran or Hadith. If they are putting that facade, but they do a practice of immoral practice or things they're playing, they're doing corruption and other unethical things, then that's actually undermine the title. A brother who may be listening today told me that he went to the bank to get an Islamic mortgage, and he got the agreement, and then he asked them to send him the actual agreement, legal agreement. When he received it, he found that the so-called Islamic bank is actually just a middleman to a conventional bank. So he asked him, what do I need to do business with you if you are just a middleman? I can just go straight to the conventional bank and do what I have to do. That's the point, what I meant here. This is just an example. I don't mean to make it, but there's a lot of application of maqasid. Remember that you gotta ask a lot of whys. Why Allah want from us this thing? Why Allah say this is halal? Why Allah say this is haram? And that's what gets you into the maqsad. But the detail will get into the rest of the classes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Please, can you say what the meaning of maqasid is in one word? Okay. The maqsad is the Arabic word for the objective, the intent. I'm giving you more than one word of the teaching of Islam. Or you could use it for anything else, not just the teaching of Islam. What is the objective? What is the maqsad of something? Hopefully I answered that. Brother Paul, welcome. Can you give example of things we should not ask why? Oh, so if you notice, Dr. Jasir Ouda alluded to this. Actually, there is no limit. We can ask for why of everything, but there is certainly there is not of a good adab to ask. And I'll give you some ultimate examples that may bring the idea home. When you read Quran, you find that prophets like Prophet Musa and Prophet Ibrahim, they asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, Prophet Musa, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see him. قَالَ رَبِّي أَرِنِي أَنظُرْ إِلَيْكَ. Oh Allah, let me see you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not tell him, don't ask question. He never said that to any of his prophets. What he told him, he actually taught him how to properly ask the question. He told him, oh Musa, you're not gonna see me. You're not gonna see me. But look at the mountain, and if it stays in its place, then you're gonna see me. Of course, the mountain crumbled. So when you take the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show him how to revive the dead. The dead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied to him, don't you believe? Ibrahim alayhi salam say, nay, I believe, but for my heart to be content, to strengthen my belief and my iman. So it is very important for us to not restrict ourselves in asking why, because it allows us to strengthen our iman. Now, coming back specifically to your question, there's certain things that are beyond our ability to grasp, like how is Allah? How is the hand of Allah? Because Allah talk about a hand. How is the Allah's throne? How can He sit on His throne? So the scholars say that this unseen questions that are beyond the ability of human being to grasp, we should not ask. I hope this answers your question, Brother Paul. Sister Amani, are you going to discuss contemporary conception of maqasid and their significance in detail? We will. Actually, both Dr. Ahmed Raisuni and Dr. Jasir Ouda and the rest of the speaker, we will be, actually, pandemic is a contemporary discussion that we're going to be doing the whole series, how to deal with crisis in general and how to deal with pandemic situation, because we don't get this every day. And yes, the answer is yes, Sister Amani. Yeah, Muhammad, go ahead.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, thank you. Just a small comment to get this way question handy for people and for all of us. I mean, as we are talking about maqasid, it's more about having the gut to question what you don't understand, regardless. And this is what the Prophet and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teach us, as Dr. Nuruddin said about the prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never talk to Ibrahim and Musa why you are asking. Asking is the essence. Now, when you are asking, you are going through the process to get the answer. And we find that even as asking about hukum that was given by the Prophet, and this is Khawla radiallahu anha in the Surah Al-Mujadala, which is coming to question the Prophet why he's delivering this hukum, which is about his husband, her husband, something like that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defended her based on her questioning of the rule. And this is the limit of going beyond stopping, oh, maybe I don't understand. Whatever we don't understand, we need to ask it. Whatever we don't get it personally in our individual meaning, it's questionable. And this having the gut to question, it's not coming from suspicious position, as we may kind of having as perception in our time. This suspicious perception that we have around our deen is just historical, is not the essence of the deen. The essence of the deen, you cannot just worship Allah while you are blind, while you are closing your brain, while you are not asking what you don't understand. You cannot. What type of worship you are doing? And this is where we need people. Once we start talking about maqasid, ask question and go beyond the comfort zone in order to deal and to have this journey of discovering yourself, discovering the essence of the teaching, and revert the simplistic application of the ruling. That's kind of the main idea. When Dr. kind of Jasir said, oh, we have ahkam is changing by time and places, because the ruling is not stable, because it's dynamic. And it could not be dynamic if we are not questioning. Just I want to bring that in mind while we are going through the process.
Jazakallah khairan, Muhammad. Very good example of al-mujadala. It's a perfect, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from 7 heavens came to respond on her behalf. Sister Amani, I may need to ask Dr. Jasir some questions about his book Maqasid Shariah's philosophy of Islamic law, about ijtihad. Is it okay? Sheikh Dr. Jasir Ouda is not with us today on the session. That was a video of his, but he's coming on the 3rd week, and he's going to be with us for the whole week. So you can have him all for yourself, of course, through Zoom. In the future, inshallah, we will bring him back, because in 2015, we brought him here and he brought his books and people bought his books. We did a lecture for him at University of Calgary. We plan, inshallah, to do that again. But if you wanted to contact me directly and if you have something more private to say, you can let me know. Hiba, regarding Brother Paul's question, isn't it from the ubudiyya al-haqqa that we follow Allah's order and maybe not knowing all the wisdom behind it? And we do so because Allah said so. Like why we do tawaf around the Kaaba, for example. Okay, Sister Hiba is talking about the issues of worship that are final. We don't get to decide, oh, Salat al-Dhuhr, I want to make it 5. I feel like making it 5. Or fasting, I want to make Ramadan more than a month, or a such thing. Those are final. And Dr. Jasir, he alluded to areas that are open, which are the majority of the areas of the deen are open for questioning and for using and applying maqasid, and the areas that are matters of ibadat that you can ask the question of why, but there is two type of whys in Arabic. In Arabic, there's two type of why. There is as-su'al al-istifsari, and there is as-su'al al-i'tiradi. So if Allah tells us to do something, we can ask why to strengthen our iman, because Ibrahim asked and Musa asked and the Sahabiya asked and even complained. قد سمع الله التي تجادلك في زوجها وتشتكي إلى الله. So yeah, I mean, definitely we have those areas that is not for us to actually we have to follow, but we can question so we can strengthen the belief and understand better. Last question here, inshallah, that would be great. I really like this book. This is ceremony talking about getting the book. By the way, some of us may have some of his books, so you could check with us and just contact us, and we have some of his books with us. This is perfect timing. We are at 8:01. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. We'll see you, inshallah, on Thursday at the same time. Look at your email. You're gonna get the invitation, and you're gonna get. We'll send you the this pandemic questions again, cases. Think about them, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.